Hey, ghouls and glam. Welcome back to Sisters and Screams, the channel where I tell real paranormal stories. Sometimes we'll do them here, and sometimes with the sisters take a back seat to the screams. If you're into ghost stories, haunted homes, and tales that make you question whether you're really alone in the room, you're in the right place. Today's story comes from a friend of mine. It's not their own experience, but something that happened to their cousin. And trust me, it escalates from weird to deeply disturbing real fast. So grab your brushes or your sage and let's get straight to it. This story is called The Spirits That Follow. This takes place in Hong Kong, in one of those towering apartment buildings where everything's packed tight. Thousands of lives stacked in concrete boxes. You sneeze and your neighbor hears it. But somehow, no one ever heard what was happening in this apartment. My friend's cousin lived in a 2-bedroom place with her husband and their 4-year-old daughter. Things started small. The little girl came home with bruises, just little ones. Nothing that screamed danger, but enough to make you stop and think. They figured she's a kid, kids fall, maybe, she probably ran into a table or something. But then the daughter started talking about a friend, a girl she played with at home, a girl no one else could see. An imaginary friend. That's what they thought, totally normal, right? But then came the nightmares. She refused to go into certain rooms, and whenever she had to go back home from her grandmother's house, she would cry. Panic cry. Not just a tantrum, that she was terrified to go home. When asked why, she would just say, I don't want to play with her anymore. Soon after, things in the apartment started to change. They began hearing low humming sounds, especially at night. The sink would mysteriously fill halfway with water. Doors opened slowly on their own, even with no draft. And the family cat, it began to stare into empty corners, hissing on what seemed to be nothing. The energy shifted. Everything felt wrong. Now, my friend's cousin wasn't particularly religious, but Chinese culture has deep roots in Taoist spiritual beliefs, especially when it comes to ghosts. So for peace of mind, she visited a shaman. The shaman took one look at her and her daughter and said, there are 2 spirits in your home, a woman and a little girl. They followed your husband home from Thailand. Now, there are different kinds of spirits in Chinese belief. Hungry ghosts, driven by unfulfilled desires or bitterness. Wandering ghosts, those without a proper burial. And yin ghosts, the darkest kind, attracted to guilt, secrets, and emotional pain. This was a yin haunting. And then the shaman dropped a bombshell. He said, your husband is having an affair. The spirits are feeding off his guilty energy. At first, she didn't believe it. But when she got home, she checked his credit card, the statements, and his phone. There were charges she didn't recognize. A single phone number that kept appearing again and again. She called it, and a woman answered. As soon as she said a single word, the woman on the other end hung up. That was all she needed. After that, obviously, she confronted her husband, and he confessed to everything. The guilt, the secrecy, it was like an open door for these spirits to move in and feed. She didn't just confront him, she left him for good. But the spirits, they weren't done yet. So the shaman came to perform a banishment ritual. Yellow talismans, inked with sacred scripts, placed over doors and windows. An altar with offerings, incense, and candles. Chanting of sutras by monks with a deep rhythmic drum beat. And on the final day, they burnt paper offerings, a paper effigy of the ghost, and even a lock of the daughter's hair. At first, the jaw sticks wouldn't stay lit. No wind, no explanation. The fumes kept blowing out, like something didn't want to leave. Eventually, the fire held. The chanting ended. The shaman said the spirits hadn't fully crossed over, but they were no longer attached to the family. Since then, the daughter sleeps through the night. The cat stares at the window instead of into corners. And the apartment, it feels lighter. But every so often, when the lights are off and everything's still, they say you can still hear it. Same low humming, like a lullaby, with no words. Thanks for listening to this episode of Scissors and Screams, where the cuts aren't always just in the hair. If you've got your own real paranormal story, DM me or drop it in the comments. Who knows, you might hear it in the next episode. But until then, I bid you goodbye. Until next time, stay sharp and stay spooky. Goodbye.